17 and 18-year-old players do not typically flourish playing in the NCAA against college opposition. But this season, there are 6 first-time draft eligibles playing in the college circuit. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the games of each and every one of them, looking at their profiles, projections, and how they play the game of hockey.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we'll be diving into my region of the draft, looking specifically at college hockey and even more specifically, the 6 first-time draft eligibles that are playing there this season. They're all very interesting for different reasons, and each and every one of them is going to be contending for at least a top 50 spot on draft day for a variety of reasons, bring a variety of toolkits to the table. In the first segment, we're going to be looking at 2 guys that have made really impressive quick starts as perhaps unexpectedly high-end talents at this level of play to start the season, and Ilia Morozov of Miami, Ohio, as well as Landon Nycz of University of Massachusetts. Then we'll be moving on the second segment to another pair of guys that you may not be overly familiar with just yet, but trust me, you will be, especially if you're watching this episode. And that is Adam Valentini of the Michigan Wolverines, as well as Lincoln Kuehne of Arizona State University. And finally, we're going to wrap up the show with the 2 biggest names playing here, both guys who are going to be contending for top 2 slots on draft day. And we're pushing them to the third segment because we already talked about them a bit in yesterday's episode. So if you want more details, you can head back there to kind of dig into how they approach the game of hockey. And those would be, of course, Gavin McKenna and Keaton Verhoeff. So that's what today's show is looking like. But before we dive into everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. So download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. So the NCAA, it's very fun to watch young players playing in this division because, in my opinion, it's one of the harder places that draft-eligible talents can play. Of course, you have outliers like the KHL and the SHL, but you have very, very few players that play significant minutes at those levels. College hockey is increasingly becoming a target destination for even draft-eligible talents, as we're seeing now with the acceptance as well of CHL alumni, which is now seeing high-end, like top 5, top 2 talents like McKenna and Verhoeff making the switch to playing their hockey at the collegiate level. But we're going to start things off with a pair of players that have really impressed me in the early season viewings here at the college ranks. I've already watched multiple games of each of them at these levels, and they're Ilia Morozov and Landon Nycz, 2 very different players who have very different strengths and play different positions. Morozov is a big, hulking, centerman who plays a very detail-oriented physical game, has a good shot, has a lot of qualities that NHL teams like, especially in players that they want to perform at a higher level come the postseason. While Landon Nycz is your mobile, intelligent, mature defenseman who's able to create advantages everywhere he goes. And these 2 guys both have good frames on them. They're both 6'3", and I mean that's a good frame. And they're both over 200 pounds. And Morozov's also the youngest player in all of college this season. It's an August 3rd birthday. So let's start with him. He's a fascinating case study, and he's playing in a program that had, to put it lightly, some struggles last season with Miami, Ohio. A team that I believe lost or went without a single victory in their last 25 games of the season beyond October last season, which is not particularly good and put them in the basement of all of the different NCAA conferences. But this season's looking different. Morozov not the only addition that they made. They also added Coach Adelik, a fantastic player from the OHL who's incredibly pacey and dynamic at speed. And he's been the line mate with Morozov so far. But let's dive into his game a little bit here, because Morozov's been one of the most fun players I've had in terms of my viewings early on this campaign. It's a rare feat, especially early in the season, for a draft-eligible talent to leave me without any frustrations while watching them play. There's always things I can nitpick. There's always things that put me off a little bit, because you have to be nitpicky in this job, especially when you're assessing top-end first-round candidates in the NHL draft. These are all fantastic players, and you have to kind of be able to pinch away at the little differences between them. And Morozov is not the most dynamic of players in the world. He's not a guy that's going to take on defenders head on with his handling skill. He doesn't really have all that high-end skill as a puck handler, and he knows that limitation. Instead, he's a very connected player. He's constantly moving the puck between his wingers. He's a natural centerman. He's big, 6'3", over 200 pounds. He lives at 205 currently as a left shot centerman. And he has been off to a flying start with 3 goals and 7 points through 4 games. Got to mention that the competition he's faced so far has not been of the highest quality. He scored 1 assist in the opening weekend against Ferris State and just logged a massive production weekend against RPI, which is Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which is one of the weaker teams in all of college hockey in Division I. And he scored 6 points, 3 in each of those 2 performances. But what's really left me impressed throughout the season here so far is the responsibility and trust that he's already earned and just been given out of camp here. He's been playing a baseline of 17 minutes, which is unusual to say the least for a freshman in college, let alone a player who doesn't turn 18 until after the draft. He's an August 3rd birthday, as I mentioned, and he's a guy who dominates the net front. He was a nightmare to deal with, especially against RPI. They did not know how to contain him, and he was able to also log a couple of goals in the first of those 2 weekend games, and both of those were really impressive to me in terms of showcasing a professional level shot in terms of the quickness he's able to get it off with and the power he's able to generate from awkward positions. He's able to catch it quickly with a single touch and immediately fire it far side, beating the goaltender above the blocker on the first of those 2 shots. And overall, he's a guy that I think has a projectable, if not dominant, shot to work with. But what really, really makes him special are the details. He's a very, very system buy-in type of guy that coaches are going to love, and clearly his coaches already do here in college hockey. He's a player who's so reliable in his own zone. He already has responsibilities on the penalty kill, on the power play, first line at even strength, just getting minutes across the board. And it's easy to see why. He's engaged, he's physical, he's intelligent. He's constantly scanning the ice. His head is on a swivel, and he's really, really getting so much information with each one of those scans, which is something that I really value in players that are this young. And while he may not have the longest runway in terms of tools and upside to run into, he's got the look of just a shoe-in third-line center if he's able to keep up his current trajectory of development through the next couple of seasons, and he could be NHL ready within 2 or 3 years. I think he's that style of guy that's just going to make that jump sooner than players drafted ahead of him because he is just so dependable. He's a guy that's going to be able to earn 4th line minutes if that's where he's able to settle in an NHL lineup, 3rd line minutes if he's able to push his way up, and 2nd line minutes if he's able to really complement high skill players at a higher extent as he's able to grow as a player. But I think that combination of high-end intelligence, physical habits, net front details, strong stick details as well, both offensively and defensively, he's constantly able to get open. There isn't much to nitpick here, and that's the thing that I respect a bunch in a player of this age. So he's certainly a guy to keep an eye on if you haven't had him on your radar already. Next up, we've got Landon Nycz of UMass there in college hockey, a team that's been off to a flying start. They're 3-0 to start the season, playing against Northern Michigan University as well as Stonehill College. Again, not the strongest opposition in the world, and Nycz is not getting the same type of deployment that Morozov is getting in terms of like first line PK plus PP, but still was able to get 15, 16 minutes in his first weekend and then 12 in the game this past weekend. And I think that he's already been showcasing the maturity with which he plays. He's 6'3", 201 pounds, one of the older players in the draft class. Is an October 4th birthday, but he moves really well. There's such fluidity in his game, and in his first game especially, I was so just like blown away by the degree of composure and adaptability that he showed on almost every single shift. He also scored a goal in his second game, and it was a nice little point shot as well that went in, but more than anything, he's able to absorb contact along the boards. He's already physically adapted to the college game. The details, the habits still have to catch up a little bit, but he has the tools, he has the frames, he has the mobility. He's able to escape pressure, just spin off of checks, like really hit pinpoint passes off of those spins, like when he right in the middle of his swivels. And overall, I think that combination of a detailed mental map, quick ability to get around the ice, and really solid puck moving skills that we've seen so far here this season. That's the profile of a first-round talent, especially being able to do so with good frame against college opposition as a first-time draft eligible. He's got all the elements there. I think there's room to improve as well as a breakout passer and a puck mover in terms of the quickness and deception he's able to show in transition. And he's never going to be like a true offensive defenseman, but as like a two-way, like dependable beast who's able to like finish his checks in the defensive zone, really be able to protect the slot and impede high danger scoring chances. And as soon as he turns the puck over, be able to immediately look north and spring counterattacks. That is exactly the profile that you look for from modern mobile defensemen in the National Hockey League. And I think that that's going to have a lot of NHL teams buzzing around him come draft day. But that wraps up this first segment here for us today. In the next one, we're going to be looking at Adam Valentini from the University of Michigan and Lincoln Kuehne of Arizona State University. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, because when you don't have a full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. Monarch is an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings together your entire financial life in one clean, easy-use interface on either your laptop or your phone. It's built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances for a long time, Monarch is built for you, as it does all the heavy lifting in your stead. You can link all of your accounts in just minutes, see clear data visualizations, and get smart categorization of your spending, and finally, feel like you are in control of your money without ever needing to touch a single spreadsheet, which is something I have to do all the time for my work. And trust me, if I were able to get that out a little bit, that would be really, really nice. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with LOCKEDONNHL as your code. Alrighty, let's keep the episode rolling here in the second segment, kicking it off with Adam Valentini of the University of Michigan. And if you are a fan of solidly built centers who play the game really intensely in both directions, support their teammates consistently, and it is just impossible to shove off the puck, this is a player up your alley. He's not the biggest frame of guys in the world. He's only 5'11", 185, but he is built like an absolute tank. Think Nick Suzuki style of build. Just really solid on his feet, really strong base, strong lower body. And he's been off to a good start playing third, second line minutes so far with the Michigan Wolverines through 4 games this season. He's logged 3 assists in that span. Michigan has looked great so far this campaign. They've made a lot of additions in the offseason, and this is a different lineup entirely from the one that disappointed a bit last campaign. They've added guys like Cole McKinney. Will Horkoff is now here to start the season as well. Malcolm Spence, not a player to forget here either. There's a lot of new guys entering the fold who are already making an impact on offense, but Valentini's not making himself invisible in any way, shape, or form when he's on the ice, which, as the youngest player on the team, as a 17-year-old, he only turns 18 on the 11th of April, I think is quite impressive. He's not a guy that's going to dominate shifts or blow you away with dynamic skill, but what he does do is connect play at a high pace, get to the middle of the ice, create space, find space, and be able to really do a lot with puck touches in congested spaces. And I think that that's something that young players like this need in order to be effective at the college level. And of course, it's been very favorable circumstances so far for Valentini's NCAA debuts. The first weekend of play came against Mercyhurst University, which Michigan won by an aggregate 11-1 scoreline through 2 games. So to get a couple assists in that span is more expected than impressive at this stage, but still, I was really impressed by his ability to get involved in the offense, little plays in transition to connect plays, and just get the puck to wingers with pace and precision. And on top of that, he's a very aware player, and I think that's going to serve him so well as he progresses up the ranks. His head is on a swivel. He's always scanning the ice, and his mental map that he's able to paint, just like Ilia Morozov, I think is ahead of his age in terms of maturity. So for a player who has a really good mindset in terms of that engagement, the aggression, the motor, and the physicality, especially at his size, I think that you can also expect him to layer in a little bit more dare with the puck on his stick and overall showcasing that skill that he does have in his toolkit as the year wears on here. But we're probably talking with Valentini as a player who is trying to get into the first round, but we're talking about kind of the 20 to 40 range here early in the season. A guy that's really like lower end of the first round, upper end of the second round. He's projectable. He's going to play NHL minutes. The question is more, will he be able to make it work on a second line someday? I'm leaning more towards no. I think we're looking more of at like a third line style of player with the direction that the National Hockey League is going in, especially. But still, a guy to definitely keep an eye on here this draft cycle. And we move on to Lincoln Kuehne, a mobile right shot defenseman who's gone over to Arizona State University after playing with the NTDP U18s last season. He played his entire year with the U18 program because he's a November 07 birthday. So he's playing with that 07 age group, even though he's one of the youngest players in that lineup. And he didn't put up many points. I mean, especially against just USHL competition. He played 27 games last year, put up 3 assists, and that's it. And so far, through 4 games with ASU, he doesn't have a single point on the board just yet. And his minutes have very much been restricted to the third pairing and even extra defensemen there in the NCAA, playing between 7 and 14 minutes a night here through 4 contests this season. But he's such a reliable player. He is a guy that, especially with the play in front of him, when he sees what's coming, reliably makes good decisions incredibly consistently. He doesn't always find the best play that's available. He's not your like Lane Hudson dynamic defenseman, but he is mobile. He uses that skating to really impede chances on the defensive side, push and angle rushers towards the boards, and really just contain the slot and protect the dangerous areas very effectively. I've seen that in the USHL last season. I've seen it in the NCAA this campaign. And I think he's probably the player with the smallest likelihood of pushing for a top 50 selection on draft day among the 6 guys that we're talking about here today. And certainly the last 2 guys that we're talking about in the last segment have no concerns in terms of that marker. They're very much pushing for top 1, top 2, top 3 ranges on draft day. But with Lincoln Kuehne, what you get is a guy with a lot of room to grow, especially as a puck mover. And I think playing in a lineup with a lot of really pacey and quick forwards like Cullen Potter, like Benjamin Keevan, both guys that have been drafted into the NHL. Cullen Potter in the first round to the Calgary Flames, and Ben Keevan in the second to the New Jersey Devils this past season. I think Lincoln Kuehne is in a really good spot this year to gain more minutes, especially as he's able to gain the trust of his coaches with the puck on his stick, and especially when he improves his retrieval game as well. His biggest weakness is currently constructed is when his back is to his opponents. So when he's getting back pressured, so when he's on retrievals and a checker is coming up behind him, the scanning habits, the awareness, the composure to make quick, pacey, precise plays in those spaces, that is still growing in his game. And that's something that could certainly hurt his draft stock at the end of the day. But with that plus level mobility, with that room to grow as a puck mover, with the flashes he shows as a passer in transition, there's a lot to like with this profile. And he's playing on a team in an environment that I think does really well with players who have some strong physical tools, but have to build the habits to compensate and support those at the next level. So Lincoln Kuehne here is your fourth guy from the NCAA who is a draft eligible. And just to recap these four players so far, because the next two are in a tier completely of their own. Ilia Morozov currently is a back half of the first guy for me, maybe top end of the second round, but that's kind of the range that I'm thinking right now. Like, say, 23rd overall to 37th overall, I think is probably where he settles on my board at the moment. Then you have, of course, Landon Nycz, who's probably a little bit higher in terms of just the pure physical tools and the upside he brings to the table. Probably like 20th to 30th overall. So late end of the first, but should really be going in the first round rather than on day two of the draft. And then, as you mentioned, with Valentini and Lincoln Kuehne here, more guys that are going to try to push their way up draft boards here as the year goes on, with Valentini having significantly better chances of finding his way into the first round and Lincoln Kuehne trying to cement himself as a second round talent. But that wraps things up here for us in the second segment. In the final one, we're going to talk about the two most exciting players here today. But again, guys that we talked about yesterday. So we're going to try to approach this from a slightly different angle. And if you feel like I didn't cover something talking about those guys, just go and watch yesterday's episode. I think it was a pretty good one, looking at Gavin McKenna and the other contenders at first overall. But before we do that, a quick message here from our sponsors at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the entire app. And you can take those swings on anything, which is one of my favorite things about FanDuel. Whether you want to make same game parlays or player props or even get in live as the action is unfolding right in front of you, the choice truly is yours. I'm always a big fan of those same game parlays as they allow me to combine multiple predictions, even from multiple different games, into a single bet in order to maximize my potential return from those swings. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the third segment, talking about Gavin McKenna and Keaton Verhoeff. And let's start off with Gavin McKenna here. We talked about yesterday on the show how this is a player that has unbridled dynamism, dominant ability to take over shifts and just embarrass his opponents. He's been dominating the WHL for 3 years already before even coming into the NHL. Well, maybe 2.5. I'm counting that first little stint he had in 16 games in the 22-23 season with Medicine Hat, where he put up 18 points. Pretty impressive for a 15-year-old kid, in my opinion. And then he followed that up with 96 points in 61 games as a D-2, and last season, 129 points in 56 games, including 41 goals, en route to a WHL championship and a Memorial Cup qualification. They didn't win, unfortunately, but he was fantastic last season. And so far this year in college hockey, it's been a bit of an up and down because the offense is still just fantastic. The physical details still have to come away. He's a bit of a lanky player still at this stage. He's 6 feet tall, 165 pounds. It's not the biggest frame in the world that he's working with, but what he does really well that I think is going to help him so much in terms of the off-puck game in the offensive zone is his intelligence and anticipation. In terms of the on-puck, in terms of like the cycle and the transition impact that he makes, he's constantly reading his teammates and the opposition, adjusting his positioning. He's incredibly deceptive, never has to look at the thing he wants to do, the puck he wants to handle, the pass he wants to make in order to do so with precision. But off puck, in terms of defensive impact in the offensive zone as a forechecker, as a back checker, he has a real knack for pickpocketing opponents. He's able to really create turnovers, and there are few players in college hockey already who are able to match the pace with which he's able to turn defense into offense. And that's something that is going to serve him so very well. He has a shot that is really threatening, but it's the playmaking that's truly special. He's able to lure in players, bring them into his orbit, attract 2, 3, even 4 players from the opposition into his space, and immediately, very deftly, deceptively, manipulatively put the puck past them to a teammate in space, giving them just wonderful, wonderful scoring opportunities. He just elevates everyone he plays with as a playmaker to an extent that I haven't seen from many players in my 6 years of doing this, as I was saying yesterday. And I think that he's a player that, even though the defensive engagement, the ability to keep his feet moving, to keep his head scanning in the defensive zone is a work in progress, to put it lightly. There have been shifts where he's just been the worst defensive player on the ice, and it hasn't been close so far with Penn State University, but he's still been able to put up 5 points in 4 games this season, and I think that point per game rate is only going to increase as the year wears on. He hasn't played a single game under 20 minutes of ice time, so he has also been kind of subject to some difficult quality of competition, and he's been exposed from time to time in terms of the defensive game, but I still think that this is a player that has so many special qualities, so much dynamism. It's difficult to make an argument for anyone else at number 1 right now. If that's going to remain the case in 4 or 5 months' time depends largely on the improvements and changes he's able to make in his own game, especially in terms of the defensive impact. So he's certainly a player to keep an eye on. Of course, he's the favorite to go first overall next June. And in terms of projection, we're talking about a Connor Bedard style player, but swap some of the goal scoring talent for playmaking, and you have, I think, a pretty decent comp, especially in terms of the physical immaturity, the defensive inconsistencies, but still a guy that projects as a guy that could be a franchise talent for whichever team drafts him. And that's a special thing to add, no matter where you're sitting and no matter the weaknesses that you have. Whichever team selects him is going to very happily work around those pieces of his game. And finally, we've got Keaton Verhoeff of the University of North Dakota, the big 6'4", 212-pound right shot defenseman, also one of the younger players in the draft class, the second youngest player in college hockey this season. It's a June 19th, 2008 birthday. He's got an absolute hammer of a shot, one of the most powerful shots I've seen from a blue liner in the last 3 or 4 drafts. It's really, really impressive. But beyond that, it's the combination of mobility, aggression, and dynamic on-puck skill, whether it be the handling, the passing ability. He's got it all. Like, whatever you want in defenseman, Keaton Verhoeff can do it. He's still building up the details and the consistency of execution and the defensive reads. Sometimes he overcommits trying to lay a hit at the defensive blue line and gets caught for an odd man rush going back the other way. But still a player, I think, that has the sky is the limit in terms of upside with Verhoeff. And he's a guy that I just find incredibly fun to watch. You're always entertained. I think that coaches might be slightly, not frustrated, but worried at times when he's on the ice because especially at the college level, he's more creative and stabilizing at this point. He has every single tool in the book to become a dominant two-way defenseman. Think like Alex Pietrangelo style of ceiling in the NHL, and maybe even a Shea Weber style of power play threat as a go-to shooter. That's the role he's playing with North Dakota here this season already. He's a defenseman on the power play, but he's one of 2 because he's not the guy with the responsibility to quarterback from the blue line. He's sitting up at the circle as a one-time threat. I love seeing that. I think it's a throwback thing, and it's just so much fun to see a player that embodies kind of like the 2000s to early 2010s style of just do-it-all defenseman. He can shoot the puck, he can pass the puck, he can lay big hits, he's reliable defensively when he's on his game, he can play PK and power play, even strength. This guy's going to be a minute muncher in the National Hockey League, and I think he's one of the early front runners for 2nd overall in this year's draft class, but he could also end up at 5th, and he might even end up pushing Gavin McKenna at number 1 if he's really able to push the gas here this season. But if you've watched any of these 6 players so far this year, or even in past years, I'd love to hear your takeaways of how they play the game, what you like, what you dislike. I know that I have some qualms with each of these players. There's some elements of frustration. None of them are perfect. but they certainly are entertaining. And this is a very special draft class for me to follow, because it not only represents the first year where I'm also covering college hockey, so I'm excited to be really diving into the NCAA realm in my focus as a scout. But more than anything, it's a fascinating year for college hockey as a whole, with the changed rules and the elite talents that are now making the switch from the CHL to the NCAA. And these last two guys that we talked about here are really, really at the forefront of what embodies those changes. And they've both been so dynamic and exciting so far early into their college careers. So I'll pass the questions on to you. What are your takeaways from these guys? And if this video was your introduction to some of these players, who would you rank like at the bottom of the list? How would you rank these guys? Of course, I think Gavin McKenna is going to be at number one for the vast majority of you. But if you were to do a 1 through 6 ranking, I'd love to see it down below in the comments. I know for me personally at this stage, you've got to go McKenna at 1, Verhoeff at 2. Number 3, I'm going Landon Nycz. Number 4, very close to Nycz, still in the first round. We've got Ilia Morozov, and then we have Valentini as the clear number 5, and Lincoln Kuehne at the back of the pack, but he has the tools to push Valentini there at 5. So a whole bunch of fun here with the 6 young 17-year-olds playing college hockey at the moment. And yeah, that wraps up the show here for us today. If you're watching on YouTube, please do leave a comment, like, subscribe. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always appreciated here on the channel. And for your second listen, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down every single detail that you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. That is it. That is all. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I look forward to catching you listening again very, very soon.